Thanks, Terry, and thank you everyone for joining us. This is my first ever Talks appearance. I'm honoured to have been asked to take part. Hopefully everyone listening will be able to take something useful from the session. I'm just going to get some slides up now. Excellent. So hopefully everyone can see that. So our topic tonight is about taking a sustainable approach to your weight loss journey. I've used a slightly provocative title, which has hopefully piqued your interest. Losing weight is easy, keeping it off is hard. And this is all about finding sustainability in a quick fix culture, what you need to know and what you need to unknow. So the aim of the presentation is to give you a framework for making dietary changes that can be sustained long term. To get to this point, I'll provide you with information that will help guide you, and I'll also dissect some of the most common mistakes that are made, which are preventing you from achieving improved health and well-being for the long term. So to start us off, let's look at some stats. So over the last 30 years, the diet industry in the Western world has boomed and is globally worth around $200 billion annually. Shakes, powders, pills and plans, all promising to fight the flab, have infiltrated daily life, with many companies becoming household names. So with this sort of growth, you would expect to see a corresponding drop in the average weight across the population, something looking a little bit like this. And yet what has actually happened is a rise in obesity levels that you would expect to mirror a rise in fast food outlets, not money spent on weight loss. Although I should make the point here that the availability of fast food and ultra-processed food in supermarkets has also played a considerable role in the growing obesity levels over this time frame, but that is definitely a topic for a different day. So what I'm saying here is not that the diet industry is responsible for the rise in obesity levels, but it's also very apparent that it isn't the solution either. So why do I say this? Well, on average, 95% of people who start a diet regain all of their weight within a few months. That means only 1 in 20 actually achieves sustainable weight loss that is maintained for the long term. More alarmingly, conservative estimates suggest that 30% of people who start a diet actually end up gaining more weight than they initially lost, leaving them in a worse position than they were before. So the timeline of an average diet looks a little bit like this. For men, this middle point here arrives at about the 6-week mark, and for women, it tends to be around the 4-week mark. So you would think that such damning statistics would be a bit of a scandal, but typically when people get to this point on the far right-hand side, a lot of people remember that they actually lost weight with the diet that they were on, and they tend to blame themselves and circumstances for gaining it all back. And so they will return to either the same plan that they did before, or they'll take on whatever the latest diet trend is going around social media, or whatever their friend is currently seeing good results on. And this cycle can repeat itself ad infinitum, over and over again. Does this sound familiar to you? It might do. I know it's certainly something that I've seen myself over the last few years with Man v Fat, and that's with structure in place that helps actually keep that accountability for longer than this 6-week mark. But fundamentally, the headline is that 95% of people fail when they diet, which is actually incorrect. And I think we need to twist this around to reflect the reality of the situation. 95% of diets fail people. So why is this? So there seems to be new diets being touted and promoted every single day. A quick Google search brings up a phone number of search results, and it's easy to see why dieters get tempted by the shiny end goals that these diets promise to deliver. So these are just a few diets here that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Some of them I wish I was making up, but they are all very real diets. And some of them are successful. People do achieve good results on this, and it's not stigmatizing any of these diets. But let's look at the underlying purpose of them and what they have in common. So why these diets tend to work for 4 to 6 weeks is that they create a calorie deficit. And this is essential for a successful weight loss program. They also provide structure. We aren't particularly well versed in or educated in the nuances of education. And so being provided with a structure and a plan to follow is a great place for people to start their weight loss journey. However, where they fall short after this 4 to 6 week mark is that they're quite impersonal. Typically, they aren't tailored for the individual, They don't take into account whether that person is cash rich or time poor, whether they have an active or sedentary lifestyle. And these sorts of circumstances do play a role in what will work well for you. They also tend to be quite inflexible. So they can be difficult to accommodate when you're on holiday or eating out or at a catered event. Basically, when you're away from your home environment and the prescribed foods aren't readily available, temptation will often lead to stray and then the diet can crash. They also tend to promote the absence of food or food groups. And these tend to be foods like carbohydrates and sweet stuff that people are tempted by daily. So by removing these completely, people are being set up for failure. They can often be very low calorie. And whilst this is fine early on, it gets harder as time goes by. And that leads on to the last point here, which is that they rely on willpower to succeed. So this can be an effective strategy at the start when motivation is high, but as time goes by, this initial enthusiasm will naturally start to decline, and it becomes harder and harder to maintain focus, especially when you're feeling hungry and you are facing temptation on a daily basis. So ultimately, these sorts of diets do often work in the short term because they do exclude foods and food groups. That means people will reduce their calorie intake as they won't often replace those foods. However, they then fail when life gets in the way. For example, has anyone finished work after a long stressful day and turned to a takeaway? Or has anyone been walking through the train station and been tempted by the smell of Greggs wafting over them? It happens to all of us. And if you've been on a strict plan, it can be very difficult to get yourself back on track again. It may seem an obvious thing to say, but the number one reason that diets fail is simply because people don't stick with them. The moment people go off their weight loss diet, they typically revert back to eating the way that they did before, and that's when they gain back the weight. So how do we transition away from this quick fix model? Well, we've seen that short-term measures lead to short-term results. So to improve our health, lose weight, and keep it off, we have to make real, sustainable, long-term changes to our daily eating behaviors. So when you're considering what approach to take into account your lifestyle. If you're cash rich and time poor, things like HelloFresh meals are a great way to avoid takeaways when you get home after a long day at work. But if you're time poor and cash poor, then this probably isn't viable long term. But actually getting into the habit of batch cooking things like bolognese or something similar might be a more feasible option for you to consider. Likewise, if you have to eat out for work several times a week, then you're going to have to adjust what you're taking off the menu and actually learning how to make better choices. Next up, consider your eating habits, food preferences, and eating triggers. If there's a food you can't live without, work it in. If you try to give me a diet without peanut butter, I'd be off the wagon within 2 days. Everything is okay in moderation. Next up, don't be rigid. Be fluid and be willing to adapt depending on the circumstances you're facing. If you do need a plan and you're not really sure where to start, adapt existing plans to suit your own preferences or lifestyle. For example, if you like certain aspects of Slimming World plans, incorporate it, but adapt it for yourself. Or if you want to have soup for lunch every day, go for it. But I would recommend moving away from cabbage soup and have a bit of variety. Prepare for failure. It's going to happen. Even the best of us have days where we just binge. But plan ahead for that and make sure it's a temporary blip and not a complete reversal. Linked into this, be willing to break your diet, but then focus on those days, focus on the calorie allowance rather than the food you're actually consuming. Obviously, if you do break your calorie allowance, it's fine. Just obviously if it's not too regular. Next, quality of the food you're eating is just as important as the quantity. You can lose weight eating only McDonald's, but your body will lack the vitamins and nutrition it would need to actually function properly. Malnutrition isn't just a third world problem. Next up, eat as much as you can. And this comes with a bit of a disclaimer. You should be looking to eat around 100 to 150 calories below your maintenance level. Your maintenance level is the amount you'd need to eat just to stay the same, not to gain weight, not to lose weight. And what I've seen quite a lot of times is people will just drop their calories to a stupidly low level. But there's no need to. If you're working 500 plus calories below your maintenance level, you won't lose any more fat than you would be eating 100 calories below your maintenance level. but you can potentially cause other issues that will affect you longer term. Next up, making your health and well-being a priority. It isn't easy, and things won't magically fall into place, and you will probably have to make some changes. After all, you can't continue with the same pattern of behavior that caused you to gain weight in the first place. And just finally, just remember that it is an ongoing process. Ironically, you may struggle to actually lose weight for that first 4 to 6 weeks as you find your feet and start building these new habits. But once they're in place, you will reap the benefits for the long term. And just a final thought, diet also means way of eating. We all have to eat in order to live. So in that respect, aren't we all on a diet? If we look at it in this way, we can simply say, I'm going to choose foods that promote health the majority of the time, yet still allow splurges for fun. And isn't that approach far less daunting than the prospect of a lifetime of cabbage soup? Thank you everyone for checking in, and I'm going to hand back over to Terry now. If you've got any questions, please do leave them in the comments and we'll try and get back to you on those. Thank you.